She walked into that courtroom like she owned the world, head high, sunglasses on, smirking like it was all a joke. But what she didn't know, what no one expected, was that the judge she thought she could humiliate would deliver a sentence that left her speechless and shook everyone watching. What happens when someone born into power believes they're untouchable? And what does it look like when that illusion shatters in front of a packed courtroom? Let me introduce you to Serena Van Dorn, 32 years old, daughter of one of the wealthiest developers in Florida. Known for her designer wardrobe, controversial social media posts, and a long history of getting away with everything, from DUIs to assaulting hotel staff. She was practically raised to believe that consequences were for other people, until the day she ran a red light and nearly killed a young black teenager crossing legally at a busy intersection. But this isn't a story about the crash. It's about the courtroom, and the woman sitting behind the bench, Judge Amara Daniels, 54, brilliant, composed, and not someone who tolerates disrespect, especially from the privileged. The courthouse that morning was buzzing. Word had already spread that Serena was being forced to attend in person. No private settlements, no lawyer-only appearance. She had to show up, and that alone made headlines. By 9 a.m., the room was full. Reporters quietly taking notes, community members watching closely, and at least 3 cell phones secretly recording behind handbags and folders. Then the door opened. Serena walked in as if she was stepping onto a runway. Long blonde hair, perfectly styled, sunglasses so big they could hide a guilty conscience, and a silk dress that screamed money. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't need to. Her smirk said it all. This is a waste of my time. Her lawyer followed closely behind, visibly tense. You could tell he had tried to talk her out of this performance, but Serena didn't care. She strutted to the defendant's table, tossed her purse on the bench like it was a beach towel, and slouched in the chair, legs crossed, phone in hand. Across the room, Judge Amara Daniels entered quietly. She didn't have to raise her voice. The second she stepped in, the room fell silent. Her presence had that effect. Wearing her black robe like armor, Judge Daniels sat down, adjusted her glasses, and began reviewing the case file with a calm, deliberate motion. "All rise," the bailiff said. Everyone stood except Serena. She sighed, loudly, then stood halfway like it was some kind of inconvenience, not protocol. Her face said it all. Why am I even here? Judge Daniels looked up. Their eyes met. No words. Just a long, piercing stare. The judge blinked once, slowly, and returned to her file. "Ms. Van Dorn," she said after a moment, "you're here today in response to multiple charges: reckless driving, endangering a pedestrian, and obstruction during your initial arrest. Do you understand these charges?" Serena didn't even look up. "Yeah, sure, whatever." A quiet gasp rippled through the courtroom. The court reporter paused. Even her lawyer froze. Judge Daniels didn't flinch. Her voice remained even. "Ms. Van Dorn, in this courtroom, we observe a standard of decorum. I strongly suggest you adjust your tone." Serena leaned back and laughed. "Right, decorum. Sure, Your Honor." The sarcasm was thick. Her words cut through the room like a blade, and it wasn't just disrespect. It was something deeper. There was a smugness in her voice, a superiority that made people shift in their seats. But Judge Daniels wasn't rattled. She calmly continued the proceedings, outlining the details of the case. Serena responded by checking her phone, filing her nails, and whispering to her lawyer mid-sentence. Then came the first real spark. "Ms. Van Dorn," the judge said, Can you confirm for the record what happened on the night of the incident?" Serena looked up briefly. "Some kid ran into the street. I honked. He got scared. That's it. He wasn't hurt." Silence. Judge Daniels closed the file, folded her hands, then spoke. "For the record," she said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet, "the pedestrian 17-year-old Elijah Brooks was crossing with the light when your vehicle accelerated. You missed him by less than 2 feet. He fell to the ground trying to escape impact and fractured his wrist." Serena shrugged. "He's fine now, right? People are so dramatic." You could hear the air suck out of the room. Every face turned to the bench, waiting. But Judge Daniels just nodded. "I see," she said. "Would you like to tell that to Mr. Brooks directly? Because he's here today." Serena froze. Her eyes darted to the back of the courtroom, and there he was, Elijah Brooks, sitting quietly, arm in a brace, eyes locked on hers, not with anger, but with disappointment. Serena looked away. Judge Daniels leaned forward, her tone still composed but heavier now. "Your dismissiveness concerns me more than your actions, Ms. Van Dorn. But this court isn't here to humiliate you. It's here to hold you accountable." And just like that, the tone shifted. Everyone in the room could feel it. Something was coming. But before we get to Judge Daniels' final words, words that would silence even the most cynical critics, we want to ask you for something. If you're feeling this story, help us reach our first milestone, 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell us in the comments, do you believe people like Serena can change, or do they just learn to hide it better? The courtroom was still. Tension hung in the air like fog. Serena Van Dorn shifted in her seat, her bravado flickering. For the first time since she entered, she looked uncertain. Not scared, not sorry, just exposed. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something into her ear, urgency in his voice. She shrugged him off with a scoff and turned her eyes toward the bench again, this time without the smirk. Judge Amara Daniels opened a folder, carefully removing a document. Her movements were slow, controlled. She didn't speak immediately. She allowed the silence to linger, long enough for it to become uncomfortable. Then she looked directly at Serena. "Ms. Van Dorn," the judge began, voice calm but carrying unmistakable weight, "do you know how many people witnessed your behavior that night?" Serena blinked. "What behavior?" "I didn't hit anyone." "That wasn't the question," Judge Daniels replied. "There were 11 witnesses, 11 people who saw your car speed up, not slow down, who saw the teenager jump back, fall, and scream. One of them was his little sister, 9 years old. She watched the whole thing." Serena's jaw clenched. Her arms folded, but she didn't respond. Judge Daniels continued, "What troubles this court is not just your recklessness. It's your complete lack of accountability. Your actions suggest entitlement. But your words reveal something deeper, something far more dangerous." Serena leaned back in her chair again, eyes narrowing. "Oh, come on. I've already said I'm sorry. What else do you want? Blood?" The courtroom reacted audibly. Whispers, a few gasps, someone muttering, "Unbelievable." But it was Judge Daniels' expression that said everything. Still, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. "Do you believe you're above responsibility, Ms. Van Dorn?" she asked softly. "No," Serena snapped. "But this is ridiculous. It's like you people want to make an example out of me." The room fell deathly quiet. "You people." 2 words, heavy, sharp, echoing. Judge Daniels' eyes didn't move. Her expression didn't change. But something in the air did. Serena, realizing the weight of what she just said, glanced around. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. "You know," Judge Daniels said slowly, "I've been on this bench for 18 years. I've seen murderers cry. I've watched thieves express guilt. But what I see in you, this cold detachment, this arrogance rooted in privilege, it's rare, and it's dangerous." Serena opened her mouth to speak, but the judge held up her hand. No interruptions. She turned her attention back to the file, flipping a page. "Let the record show that Ms. Van Dorn has previously been cited for disorderly conduct, driving under the influence, and 3 separate incidents of verbal assault, each dismissed quietly out of court, each one ending with a check or a connection. But that ends here." Serena shifted uncomfortably. Her posture stiffened. The color in her face changed slightly. Judge Daniels stood up. Her robe fell into place with grace and finality. "This court is not interested in humiliation nor revenge, but justice without growth is punishment without meaning, and I believe, even in your current state, that you are capable of learning, whether you want to or not." She looked down at Serena, eyes firm. "You will not be sentenced to jail, not because you don't deserve it, but because it would be too easy." Serena looked confused. Her lips parted slightly. "You will serve 200 hours of community service," the judge continued, "but not just anywhere. You will report to the Urban Roots Rehabilitation Center, a nonprofit dedicated to helping low-income families rebuild their lives after incarceration, poverty, and abuse." The murmurs returned. A few people nodded. Others whispered to each other. "You will work under the supervision of community leaders, people who have lived lives you've never imagined, people you might have dismissed without a second thought in any other circumstance." Serena scoffed. "Seriously, I'm not some social worker." Judge Daniels didn't respond to the comment. She simply moved forward. "In addition to the service, you will attend weekly restorative justice sessions. There, you will sit in the same room with people who have suffered because of reckless choices, many made by others who never faced consequences. You will also submit a reflection report every 2 weeks," the judge added, "reviewed by this court. If you fail to comply, you will return here, and I will have no hesitation sentencing you to jail time." Now it was silent again. Serena crossed her arms but said nothing. Her eyes darted toward Elijah in the gallery, still watching. His face was calm, but his presence was a mirror she couldn't avoid anymore. Judge Daniels sat down again. "I'm not here to break you, Ms. Van Dorn," she said. "I'm here to help you see the world outside your own. Because if you don't, one day your ignorance will destroy someone, or yourself." And then she added, almost as an afterthought, but it hit harder than anything else said that day, "You looked at this courtroom and saw inconvenience, but we looked at you and saw a warning." Serena's jaw trembled slightly. She blinked, slowly. The room, for the first time, felt real to her. Heavy, too heavy. The judge turned to the bailiff. "Schedule the next review hearing in 30 days. "Yes, Your Honor." As paper shuffled and the courtroom stirred again, Serena sat motionless. No more eye rolls, no more laughs. Her phone untouched, her posture stiff. The fall from privilege hadn't hit the ground yet, but it had begun. Monday morning arrived with a coldness Serena wasn't used to, not in the air, but in the silence. Her driver wasn't allowed to drop her off inside the gates. She stood alone outside the Urban Roots Rehabilitation Center, wearing designer boots and a puffer coat that cost more than most people's rent. She looked at the building in front of her like it was a prison. Faded paint, a cracked sidewalk. People lined up at the door, some talking, some just standing, with blank stares and tired shoulders. Nothing here looked like her world. She adjusted her sunglasses, pulled her coat tighter, and stepped forward. Inside, the smell of strong coffee and bleach greeted her. A woman at the front desk looked up, raised an eyebrow, and gave her a once-over. "You the court order?" the woman asked. Serena hesitated. "I guess." "Name?" "Serena Van Dorn." The woman nodded, picked up the phone, and said, "Yeah, she's here." Moments later, a woman in her early 50s appeared from the hallway. No makeup, plain clothes, but her presence was undeniable. Her name was Monique Tillman, director of the center, and someone who had built everything here from the ground up after spending 12 years in and out of shelters herself. "You're the rich girl?" Monique asked, arms crossed. Serena opened her mouth to protest the label, but decided against it. "I'm here for the community service." Monique gave a short nod. "Follow me." They walked through narrow halls into the kitchen. People were prepping trays of food, cleaning tables, loading bins. The atmosphere was busy but focused. "You'll start here," Monique said, serving lunch, washing dishes, cleaning after people eat. Serena blinked. "I thought I'd be doing, like, paperwork or something." Monique looked her dead in the eye. "Number, you're here to work. You want paperwork? Go back to your lawyer." Before Serena could respond, Monique walked away, and just like that, Serena was left standing there. No assistance, no excuses, just a tray of food, an apron, and the weight of her new reality. The first few hours were brutal. People didn't say, "Please." They didn't smile. Some were rude. Others were too tired to care who she was. At one point, a woman with 3 children snapped at her for taking too long. Serena almost lost it, but remembered the judge's words. "If you fail to comply..." By lunchtime, her feet hurt. Her manicure was ruined. Her phone was locked in a drawer. She hadn't checked her notifications in hours, and the withdrawal was real. But the moment that shook her didn't come from the work. It came from a conversation. She was wiping down a table when a woman sat beside her, mid-40s, messy braids, old coat. She looked at Serena with a mix of curiosity and challenge. "You knew?" she asked. "Yeah," Serena replied without looking up. The woman smiled. "You don't look like you're from around here." "I'm not." The woman took a sip from her paper cup and leaned back. "Name's Janelle. Been coming here 3 months now. Used to have my own salon. Then I got sick. Medical bills hit, lost the business, lost the house. Now I'm trying to get back up." Serena finally looked at her. "I had no idea," she said softly. Janelle shrugged. "Nobody does. People walk past us like we chose this life, like we're invisible unless we cause trouble. I used to be just like you." Serena frowned. "No offense, but you don't know anything about me." Janelle smiled again. Not a warm smile, an honest one. "You're right, but I know that look in your eyes. I've worn it." And just like that, Janelle stood and walked away. Serena stared at the table for a long time after that. Her world, the one made of champagne brunches and gated estates, suddenly felt small and quiet. By the end of the day, her hands were raw. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. And for the first time in years, she had nothing clever to say. When she got back in the car, her driver tried to make conversation. "How was it, Miss Van Dorn?" She didn't answer. She just stared out the window, watching the streets blur into shadows. And that night, she didn't post a single thing on social media. Day 12. Serena Van Dorn stood in the center's small kitchen, sleeves rolled up, sweat on her forehead, scrubbing trays as if her life depended on it. Because in some ways, it did. She hadn't worn makeup in days. The designer boots were long gone, replaced by second-hand sneakers donated by one of the staff. Her hair tied in a sloppy bun, her voice quieter. But something deeper had changed. She no longer flinched when people raised their voices. She didn't complain when things got hard. And for the first time in her life, she listened more than she spoke. It hadn't happened all at once. It took being yelled at, being ignored, cleaning up after people who didn't care who she was. It took stories like Janelle's and others she couldn't forget, like Marcus, a man who taught himself to read at 40 after leaving prison and still couldn't find a job. Or Tasha, a single mom with 3 jobs who still came to the shelter for dinner. Each one chipped away at the shell she'd built around herself, not her money, not her fame, but her indifference. And then came the letter. On day 20, Judge Amara Daniels requested a written report of Serena's progress, a personal reflection. Serena sat in the tiny staff lounge that night, staring at the blank page. At first, she tried to fake it, write what the court wanted to hear, but her hand stopped mid-sentence. She tore the page out and started again. This time, she wrote what she really felt, about the guilt, the anger, the shame of not knowing how blind she'd been. She wrote about Elijah Brooks and how she'd never even asked if he was okay, how she had dehumanized people without realizing it, because it was easier that way. She wrote until her hand hurt, and when she finished, she cried, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet sob, alone in the room, as if a part of her had finally cracked open. By day 30, she was ready. Back in court, Serena looked like a different woman. Same face, but the expression was new, humble, unsure, alert. Judge Daniels reviewed the case file again, flipping through the service reports, the written reflections, and the progress evaluations submitted by the center. She looked up. "Ms. Van Dorn, how do you plead today?" Serena stood. "Guilty, Your Honor, not just of the charges, but of the mindset I walked in here with. I didn't see people, I saw problems, and I was wrong." Judge Daniels leaned back in her chair, quiet for a moment. "You have completed the court's orders," she said, "but the sentence was never about checking boxes. It was about waking up." She paused. "And I believe you finally opened your eyes." Serena nodded, eyes misty. Judge Daniels continued, her voice firm but warm. "The law can't change hearts, but sometimes life can. This court considers your case closed. I sincerely hope your old life stays behind you." The gavel struck. Court adjourned. As Serena turned to leave, she passed Elijah Brooks in the hallway. He was waiting with his mother, still wearing a brace but smiling now. Their eyes met. This time she didn't look away. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Elijah nodded once. "Just do better. That's all I ever wanted." She swallowed the lump in her throat and walked out of the courthouse. No cameras, no interviews, no headlines, just quiet, real quiet. For the first time, she liked it that way, and that, right there, is the power of accountability. Not the kind that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from facing who you really are. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Serena truly changed? Or was it just survival? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story hits you in any way, help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Click that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share your thoughts below. Your support helps us tell more real, powerful stories that matter. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.